Nora.
Welcome, comadres and friends. I'm Dr. Nora de Hoyos Comstock, national and international founder of Las Comadres para las Americas. The leadership team and I are pleased to have you join us for tonight's teleconference as we are beginning our 17th year.
Yay.
It has been our privilege to support Latino authors throughout these 17 years, and we look forward to many more years to come. We'd also like to extend a warm welcome to our readers following us on our live Twitter chat at Read Latino Lit. Tonight, please help us welcome authors Xochitl Gonzalez and Cristina Garcia. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. Please keep yourselves on mute. And you can keep your videos, but remember that others have their full gallery on view, and so you can be seen. So try to not be too distracting in your motions. We suggest you put yourself on mute mode, but gallery works as well. If you have any questions or comments, please put them in the chat and we will try to get to them. First, let's start with our book club's history. Comadre Maria.
Good evening, everyone. I am Maria Ferrer, the Executive Director of Las Comadres para las Americas. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York City. After a brief hiatus, Nora Comstock re-envisioned and relaunched the book club to make it nationwide, to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to bookstores, and to support our writers. We started these teleconferences in October 2006. We are in our 17th year of sharing works by Latino authors with all of you. We created the teleconferences and the book club to entice everyone to read more Latino authors, to learn about Latino roots and the different perspectives of Latino culture and heritage. Our book club and teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. We encourage you to join our local book club in your city or in your time zone. We have 12 book clubs in 12 cities. There's sure to be one that fits your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, help us start one. For more information about the book club, please visit our website at latinolit.com. So please invite others to join us. Comadre Karen.
Welcome, comadres and friends, to our May 2024 Zoom teleconference. I'm Karen Gonzalez, Assistant Coordinator for the Las Comadres and Friends Book Club, Denver Comadres Book Club Facilitator, and co-founder of the Colorado Alliance of Latino Mentors and Authors. Thank you for joining us tonight. Our interviews begin tonight with author Xochitl Gonzalez, the New York Times bestselling author of Olga Dies Dreaming. Her new novel, ANITA de MONTE, last published in March 2024, is a Reese's Book Club pick. As a staff writer for The Atlantic, she was recognized as a 2023 finalist for the Pulitzer Prize in Commentary. A native Brooklynite and proud public school graduate, Xochitl holds a BA from Brown University, an MFA, and an MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Interviewing Xochitl is Patricia M. Garcia, an associate professor of instruction in the Department of English at the University of Texas at Austin. She has published numerous articles and reviews on Latinx literature, English Renaissance literature, and English pedagogy. She has won numerous university teaching awards. She is also a faculty member in the Free Minds program, teaching humanities courses to post-traditional students returning to college learning. Take it away, Comadre Patricia.
All right, welcome everyone. I'm so excited to participate in this event, to read such fabulous books and have this chance to talk to authors. So thank you so much for your beautiful work, Xochitl. And I had asked her to begin with reading a passage from the novel, and it's a very powerful passage. This is the passage where of Anita's death, and if you've read the book, it's not a surprise to you that she dies. And she dies in a really horrific manner, thrown from a window by her husband. So just be aware of that as she's reading it. And one of the reasons that I asked her to read this passage is that I think it really gives Anita a voice, a voice that is truly hers, that is speaking in the last moments of her passing and her passing through to another state. So welcome, Xochitl, and thank you so much for sharing your words with us.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me. Okay. I stumbled my way into the bedroom, crawled up on the bed, hoping it would stop, but he was just steps behind me. He punched me hard before he picked me up, and I realized my heart nearly stopped from the fear of it, that he was carrying me to the window. My eyes were cloudy with tears and blood, but I opened them and looked into his eyes, right in those icy blue eyes, and screamed, "No!" loud, in the desperate hope that it would pierce his rage, poke at his senses. No, 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 but I wasn't loud enough. I clawed his face as he put me on the windowsill. I clutched the frame like a desperate kitten. My fingers grasped with such ferocity, I am sure I broke one or two, but didn't feel a thing beyond terror. There was a brief moment where he debated it, seconds really, but it slowed down enough that I could hear the car horns honking on Broadway, the warm breeze cool against the hot blood running down my forehead. I could hear my heart beating and his heavy breathing. I wanted to stay on that windowsill so badly. I wanted to do so many things with my life. I wanted to be so much, and I was just starting to figure it out. I was just fucking figuring it out. But I was small and tired, and he was big and full of venom, and I had burned the bridge. No, 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 I screamed again, but he couldn't hear me through his madness, and I couldn't hear him through the blood throbbing hard against the walls of my brain. All it took was a shove, no harder than a bully at a playground, and then there was wind. Breath sucked in that I knew would never be exhaled again. As I fell, I wondered if when I landed, my eyes would be closed or open. I wanted to keep them open. The fall was quick, Jack's face in the window, quick, the wind punching a hole through my ribs, quick, the building a blur of concrete and reading lights and TVs and windows, quick, body bowed in two, quick, the black tar of a roof, and I willed myself not to die of a heart attack because I refused to give him the satisfaction of thinking for a moment that I died of fear and not impact. Quick, only I didn't land, I didn't crash. Quick, the plunge of breaking through a body of water, the splash of me I could feel extending to at least the 14th or 15th floor of Jack's apartment building. The sounds now not of fear or screams or cabs honking and Saturday night movies, but of a heartbeat. The fall slowed to a submersion deeper and deeper, and eyes open, I could see around me the schools of fish, glorious and multicolored. Above me, the sun refracted off the top of the waves, aquamarine. The water was warm like a womb, and in that moment, I realized it was that the sound of the ocean waves was just Yemaya inhaling and exhaling, in and out, that she was the mother and I'd been returned to her, that she was blessing me not with an ending, but a new kind of start. I began to swim up toward the light and farther from the fish and the stingrays and wound my way around the seahorses and the jellyfish. The water got clearer and clearer until it was a blue I knew from a place at the root of my soul. In the shallows, I was able to put my feet down on the sand floor, standing on the floor of Yemaya's world and looking at mine, Veradero Beach, just as I'd left it last.
Thank you so much. That's such a powerful passage, and so horrifying. And the way you balance her fear and the chaos, but with her determined nature to not die of the heart attack, to, in a sense, to get this sense of herself. It's one of the things that I really admire in this novel, how you have multiple narrators, multiple plots, and you give each of those narrators their own sort of voice. So you can, even if it doesn't say at the beginning, Jack or Raquel, who's speaking at that moment. And that is something I really appreciate this. It's a way also of how you bring these voices together in the conversation. So I guess my question is, how do you do that? How do you create these voices and create all these threads? And then like later on, I'll go back and I'll start like organizing. I'll try to see how you organize all the chapters, but how did you do that? How did you decide to give everyone a voice here and then bring them together?
Yeah, I mean, I think I had always imagined, I never thought of the book without it being these two women's stories together.
Mm-hmm.
So to some extent, it was easier to find Anita. I started out writing her third person, and even third person, she had a pretty distinct voice. And then I realized she needed to be first person for a bunch of reasons, but one of them was that when she was third person, there was still like a distance between you, the reader, knowing that because you find out in chapter 1 she dies, knowing that she died and pretty much being certain that it was not of a natural cause. And the idea of her being a victim of something and then reading about her, right? And so what ends up happening is like you sort of like felt sad. Like no matter how strong what she was saying was, you felt a sadness about it. And so I had to pull her into the first person because I think the idea is that you shouldn't feel sad. You should feel what she's feeling, right? Like as much as humanly possible. And so she sort of came to me the easiest. And then I'd actually say Jack was the second easiest, and Raquel was actually the college student, was the hardest because I think it was really difficult to imagine yourself again that young.
Yeah.
And I had been writing it and it wasn't going great. It wasn't going great. Like there was something about it, like the judgment of the experience to some extent. And then I read Mame by Jessica George. It was like a debut novel, and she's in her early 20s. And then that made me realize what was wrong. And then I found my old diaries and I went through to just hear like the way you talked and also the way you let things go. You know, sometimes like I think what we forget is like when we're that age, now I think we like to resolve a problem. Like in my 40s, like it's like I should talk to my therapist about this. But in my 20s, like in my 20s, something crazy would happen, and then you're just like, let me go to a party and never think about this again.
Exactly.
Like, you just
Maybe take advice from our younger self.
like right, you just have like a different way of thinking about things, and I think it was like getting back to that was the most challenging. So, but I always knew at least the two women had to have their voices very distinctly heard, because part of it was that I wanted us to see, you know, weirdly generationally, sometimes I think we can judge each other, like especially, you know,
Boomer, right?
yeah, and like, and even now, like, you know, sometimes I look at younger women, like I'm in my late 40s, and I look at younger women in their 20s. I'm like, I don't get it. And then I'm like, okay, that's not the right attitude to have. We have to take a second to have a little more empathy for, and remember, you know, what we didn't know. And also, I think in this particular book, remember how new feminism is. And how differently we thought about things just within a decade span, or, you know, 15-year span. So, and then I think it felt important to me to write the husband's point of view, despite him being sort of a terrible person, because a lot of the book is about power and power structures.
Yeah.
And he has a lot of power. And I felt like people think of power as, in some ways, it's so good that we've gotten to this place where we talk about systemic things, but I think sometimes we forget that systems are run by people. And and I think it's good to just sort of get in there and see the way in which a whole industry kind of conspired against this woman after her death, but in action to hide her work and to keep him famous and to keep her obscure. But a whole industry is also just a handful of people, right?
Exactly.
Like,
And women too.
and women too. That was
Women.
very important to me. That was critically important to me, like to show how women were part of this, and like that, you know, there are times where, you know, I think in this book, it's like you can see the best of women and you can see the worst of women in all in the same book. Like, and it's like, and I think, you know, Raquel is saved by women, and Anita in a lot of ways was brought down by women. And I think it was like important to show, again, like to some extent, the evolving notion of feminism, but also the evolving notion of sisterhood, and what that looks like. So yeah, it was, I'd say Anita's voice came first and most clearly, always. And then everybody else kind of found their way around it. But Raquel, maybe because she was the closest to me in some way, it was the hardest.
And she has to be the one to sort of mediate their stories too. You know, she's definitely the voice that puts the narrative together. Something that I was thinking about with you know, her experiences and sort of those questions of power, giving Jack a voice, you also see where he's very weak, right?
Yes.
Where that that anger and that need to assert himself comes from this place of insecurity. Not that it excuses it or makes you feel sorry for him, but it explains it in those ways.
Yeah.
So that's important.
Yeah, and I did a lot of research about that. Like I read a lot of like sociology dissertations about domestic violence and like, like oral studies of men that had and I think what I found as the common thread was a lot of insecurity.
Yeah.
And I thought that actually seemed quite fitting for an artist, and I think, a funny thing about Jack is like we always put aging and worries about aging on women, but actually I think that it's a male affliction as well, and it just doesn't get looked at, right? Yeah.
Completely. So getting back to Raquel and her experience in the Ivies and at the Ivy League school, and that feeling of imposter syndrome, and that sort of feeling like, what's my place here? So I'm in Texas. I'm a professor at UT, and we have had a really rough semester with the Senate Bill 17 that outlawed DEI on campus. And so, for example, the office on campus that helped different groups put on Latinx graduation, Black graduation, LGBTQ graduation, that center went away. It was called Multicultural Center. And so the students had to plan their own graduations off campus. Wow. And I mean, it was just this moment of,
oh my God,
these spaces, when you talk about those spaces there, how do we create spaces for students to do that? And so I guess the question is, you've set the novel in the 90s, the late 90s.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2024, and we're still having these issues.
I know.
There's more different, like you were talking about before we got on, there's definitely more diversity in all of these places because of DEI efforts. But I think sometimes for students, it's hard to find that place. So in the novel, Raquel does find that place, and she finds it with music, and she finds it with, her friends, and she comes to rely with that. So I guess my question about that is was that your experience, and how do you think, like someone, an undergraduate reading this today, feeling like this is my story too, what would you tell them?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think I originally wanted to set it in that time. The one difference is, okay, because I was talking to somebody about a film adaptation, and they're like, we could set it now. And I was like, the other students wouldn't be so brazen about their opinions now.
Yeah.
And I think that probably the biggest difference is that the other students are more embarrassed by the attitude, than I think they were when I was there, which was much more like, oh my God, you really are taking a spot, and I think there is a higher awareness of privilege in general on campuses, in terms of oh, wow, I'm in this position. That said, I definitely think that there is a fragility of the sense of belonging. And I think one of the things that's so challenging at a four-year institution is these in 2 years, will they know that there used to be Latinx graduation? Right? And that's the weirdest part. It's so you're starting all over again. And it's how do you engage the students that are here now to come back and keep that going for them when the institute, how do you make people feel like the institution? And I think one of the reasons why I ended up setting it at Brown, partly because it's the only Ivy that I could have ever looked at. I personally could have even imagined myself anywhere else. But I wanted it to be at one of those kinds of places, is just you don't feel like a part of it. I said this to a friend of mine at Iowa, a friend of mine from Florida at Iowa, and he was like, I don't feel like I belong in this school. And, I was much older than my co-students, because I went back at 42, and most of my classmates were 24, 25, and and he was like, I don't feel like I fit in here. And I was like, you are here. The school is buildings. We're the institution, right? You are here. And I think the more that we can embody that message to students, like the more I think, but I, you know, that notion, it's very scary. You're 18 and you're doing something you've never done before, and maybe nobody in your family has done before, and you don't feel like you have any power. And so you know, I think in a weird way, I hope that it's a comfort to see this, even though a lot of things have changed. I hope it's a comfort to see the way that Raquel and her friends can navigate it and create space for each other. And I think a young woman asked me what I wish that she could get out of the book. And I was like, that you need other people. Like you can't hold it to yourself. Like you can't hold the hard things to yourself. And so this need for community is so important. And you know, so like it's I don't know. It makes me, it's funny because I think you know, hearing about those offices, that office getting like just decimated, just breaks my heart. But it's like, it's sort of like, how can the people that have come before help this go for the other kids, you know, so that they at least know that there's some tradition that's theirs.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's very much our responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a lot of what Las Comadres does, is create those communities. And it's also a way, I think, to help someone out of a cycle of abuse. Right?
Totally.
To
Oh my
have that
gosh.
practice. Yeah.
No,
Like,
completely.
I love when she comes back, and you know, after the scene where Nick cuts her hair,
Yeah.
and just horrifying, and how her friends like gather around her and they give her Olympia, and, you know, they help her, and that's what
Yeah.
she needed.
Yeah.
And
You know, a thing that was so interesting to me, like that I didn't notice until I was working on this book, was I hadn't realized how, you know, and I had girlfriends from college, Latino girlfriends from college, that were like, I didn't know we were going through the exact same thing. But like when we get there, and it's like, you don't want to seem to your parent or your mom in particular, usually, like that you're struggling, because then it's like another,
they've
I
sacrificed so much for you to
know,
get there.
like, you know,
Just
like,
come home.
like, yeah, or it's like, what do you mean work harder? You know, like it goes one way or the other. And like, and I think it ends up, it didn't occur to me how much I was cut off, my friends were cut off from the support system that we'd had before. And so when you then feel like you can't tell anybody about the things that you're struggling with, you're really isolated. And so like, I think that this like but honestly, my Latino girlfriends saved me in school. Like that, I have such a soft, I don't know, like in my heart because of it. And that whole idea was sort of a tribute in some ways to them. Even when we didn't know the nitty gritty, it was like, you're struggling, girl. I see it. Like,
Yeah, you can see it in there.
right. Yeah.
So the other thing that I think about, you know, you'd have to change all the music references to make it like could be why I wouldn't be able to write a day, because I wouldn't know the music. But one of the things that I was really thinking about is how, when, you know, Anita is able to be the ghost, right? Become a ghost and haunt and, you know, move around and do what she needs to do. I saw your dog there now. My dog just came back into the room. Is that, you know, it's that her art needs to be in the world and living. And so there's a passage in Gloria Anzaldua's book, Borderlands La Frontera, where she talks about, and I went and looked up the quote, that art has an identity. It is a who or what that contains the presence of persons. It is both a physical thing and a power that infuses it.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's such an important part of Anita's artistic practices. And also what Raquel is doing in trying to, you know, bring her story and her art into the conversation, right? It has to become, it's like our history needs to, we need to keep talking about it, right?
Yes.
So how do you think that works with your own writing? Like when you are writing about these experiences and reliving these experiences, but also putting them out there in the world, how does that, in a sense, come alive, and what can it do for people?
Yeah, well, I think I've been thinking so much about this. I think in some ways, like the pressure to sort of assimilate is like a real danger to our community, because what happens is, like, you know, you go through and you're like, everything was great and I'm just like everybody else. And then your struggles that might relate to somebody else's kind of get lost, and they think that they're the first person that, and I always say, like, you're the first person that made fire, right? Like, and it's like, and I think, and it feels like that. And so I think that, to me, what I try to do, even with the book itself, was, you know, you know, the story that is the sort of spine of Anita de Monte's story was Ana Mendieta's story, to try and lead people to that story, because she was lost. She was taken from my education, like my formal education. I never was exposed to her. I was never exposed to any Latino artists, any like barely any minority artists, period. And it felt like I was the first person trying to navigate this world. And then suddenly I was like, oh, this had happened to her. And I think just even bringing that to light, you know, and I think even in my first book, it was like so many people did not, it was not even just not know about, let's say, the Young Lords, but they didn't know about the history of rebellion in Puerto Rico, right? Like, and it's like, yeah, it's been a colony, but there's also been resistance to that the entire time. And so I think I really feel like what I'm trying to do is sort of like restorative narrative work in some way, you know, like where it's like looking at, I don't even like to think of what I'm doing as historical fiction, but it's like reasserting these narratives that have gotten lost, or these like tiny stories. You know, like I gave a talk and I was talking about Freddie Prinze, right? About entertainment industry. And I was like, everybody always says, oh, no one will watch a Latino show. I was like, 50 years ago, the most popular show on TV starred a Latino. Like he was the most famous man in America for 3 years, and then he died. And then they were like, no one will watch a show. And I'm like, that's a lie. It's just a lie that you made up, because we proved it wrong so long ago. And it's like, and if we don't keep reasserting it, like, it's like you can get away with this idea of like, oh, you're lucky to be here. You're the only Latino. You know what I mean? And it's like, and I think it's that we need the continuity of narrative. And I try to do that as much as I can in all my work.
No, I think it's so important to, because after I read this, like I got to go look her up, and I started looking through art and started finding things about her. And one of the things that was really, you know, those time moments where the world comes together. So in the third edition of Gloria Anzaldúa and Sherry Moraga's Bridge Call My Back, one of her images is on the cover.
Yes, that's
and
right.
I loved it. And then I noticed that in the next edition, her artwork is included as one of the, you know, one of these radical women writers and artists that becomes part of it, right? So, but to realize that, you know, all these things the pieces start to connect, right? And you start asking these questions that are there. So, well, we're almost ready to move on to Cristina's story. I still have so many questions, but something I always ask when I talk to writers, what are you reading? What would you recommend for us to read? Maybe we can get it on the book list. Or what are you watching? Things that are really interesting you right now. And what's next for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I mean, if people haven't read What Happened to Ruthie Ramirez by Claire Jimenez, it's amazing. It's amazing. It just won the Penn Faulkner, which I was one of the judges, and it stays with you like smoke. It's so fantastic. I don't know. It's so amazingly good. And then I've been rereading Sula, which I just hadn't read since high school, and it's been a lot of fun. I've been going back to, Claire Jimenez is great. She's like, she's just amazing. And then Victim is also a lot of fun, especially for people that are in academia. It's like a really awesome story about a young guy's trajectory after he's coached to heighten a personal tragedy for his college essay. And it sort of keeps going. It's a satire in a great way, but that's
a real
really, really good and a lot of fun. And a lot of fun. And then, you know, what's next? I'm gonna burrow away this summer, and I'm working on my new book, and it's a gender swapped retelling of The Great Gatsby set before the fiscal crisis in New York. And I'm really excited to just kind of plug away at it. Obviously, Latino leads, because that's just.
Oh, but I love that idea of taking that story, which is set in this culture and is all about
Capitalism and capitalism and like, and I think also just, you know, a really interesting thing happens. I went to see a really bad gender swapping of Company, like, and it was not good. And you were just like, but women would think differently. And like, it's like, you know, sort of embracing the ways in which we actually think differently. And then it makes it really interesting, right? Like,
that'd be great. Well, we will look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being part of this and for giving us a whole list. Maybe I'll try to put all those in the chat as we move to our next speaker. But again, good luck to you, and we look forward to the new novel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh, gracias, comadres. Our second interview is with Cristina Garcia, who worked for Time Magazine as a researcher, reporter, and Miami bureau chief before she turned to writing fiction. Her first novel, Dreaming in Cuban, 1992, received critical acclaim and was a finalist for the National Book Award. She is the author of 8 novels. Her latest novel, Vanishing Maps, 2024, is a follow-up novel to Dreaming in Cuban that tracks 4 generations of the Del Pino family. Recently, she was a visiting professor at the University of San Francisco and is now resident playwright at Central Works Theater in Berkeley. Interviewing Cristina is Comadre Tess Tobin. Tess is the project manager for Las Comadres National Latino Book Club. She is the former president of Reforma, the National Association to promote library and information science to Latinos and the Spanish-speaking. She has been a proud member of the book club since 2007 and enjoys promoting the work of Latino authors. Take it away, Comadre Tess.
Hey, good evening, Cristina. So happy to have you with us tonight.
Oh, I'm pleased to be here. Thanks. Thank you for inviting me.
Right, it's so inspiring to listen to writers. Of course, you know, your interviews always begin with dreaming in Cuba, excuse me. Anyway, you want to give us a little synopsis of that and how it leads into Vanishing Maps?
Sure. So my first novel, Dreaming in Cuban, as you said, came out in 1992, same year my daughter was born. It's very momentous. And that, I would say, is really my most autobiographical novel. First novels often are. And it tells the tale of a family divided over the revolution. Part of the family, I mean, it focuses on 4 women, and one mother-daughter end up in New York, and the matriarch and one of her daughters ends up in Cuba, and they're you know, the political animosities persist over decades, and you know, despite attempts at reconciliation. I guess that's one way of putting it. And then, and I thought it was a discrete novel. I never intended to follow up on any of these characters, but I've been writing theater in the last few years, and I adapted a version of that book, Dreaming in Cuban, and then my curiosity about them got reignited. And people would ask me, oh, well, whatever happened to so-and-so? Or did this person actually die or just walk into the sea? And my answer was always, I don't, you know, my guess is as good as yours. But then I began working on it as sort of as an offshoot of this theatrical adaptation. And I couldn't stop because so much crazy stuff had been happening for 20, 30 years. And I kind of felt like they'd all been waiting with their arms crossed saying, it's about time you got back to us. And so that's how Vanishing Maps was born.
Oh, that's great. And it was, what, 27 years or something between Dreaming and this one? Great.
Yeah.
Your characters are very diverse. We have a businesswoman, we have a sculptor, we have Ivanito, who's a drag queen. We have a 90-year-old grandmother. What inspires you to develop these characters?
Well, I think I want to reflect the kind of complexity and conflict and irrepressible love of big, messy families. And so this one is certainly one of them. And not only do we have a lot of intergenerational appearances, but even the dead come back, and people assume other identities or subsume themselves in other cultures. I mean, this book, Vanishing Maps, not only are people speaking Spanish, but you know, they grew up speaking Russian, Czech. It's really, I think of it as a very diasporic look at the Cuban condition, hyphenated Cuban conditions, not just Cuban American. And I think so much of what we think we know about Cubans and Cuban Americans are defined sort of by Miami and Havana. that very well-defined divide. But really, our experiences are just sort of exponentially bigger than that. And I have sort of dedicated a big part of my writing life to exploring the outer perimeters of what it means to be Cuban, what it means to belong, and what it means to find home.
Right. There's a lot going on, especially when, the cousins reunite. And I was impressed. I remember back when authors would put Spanish in their books, it was always the next line or two, they translate what they wrote. You have a lot of German and Russian in the book, but you don't translate it. So I was just wondering, do you speak those languages, or did you do the research, or how did that come about?
I've studied, I was at one point pretty fluent in German. I took German through college and had studied in Germany. And then I took one pretty miserable year of Russian in college that I had to take for pass fail. It was so hard. But, when you look at the history of Cuba, post-revolutionary Cuba, it had long and complex associations with the Eastern Bloc, with the Soviet Union. A lot of Cubans went to study in the Soviet Union. My own uncle got a PhD in Czechoslovakia in engineering. So it just became, by its nature, more international. And so there were all of these, what one might think of superficially as unlikely, cultural hyphenations, but they happened, and there was fallout from that, and they exist too, and they are part of the Cuban story as well. And I wanted to capture some of that. I think I've done that in some of my other books too, like in Monkey Hunting, for example, my third novel. I look at the Chinese Cubans, and a lot of people didn't even know that quite a huge population existed, and the Chinese began coming to Cuba in the 1840s and played a big role in the wars of independence. And even, their presence in Cuba inflected Spanish itself with a lot of Chinese expressions or references to the Chinese Cubans. So I don't know, for me, it's a big complex story and endlessly fascinating, and that's part of my mission.
Yeah, and is that how you came about with the title, Vanishing Maps, and putting the story
Yes,
into
I think
writing?
so, because the book is set in 1999, 2000. We're in a sense, we're in the post-Soviet world. That world has vanished, and along with it, all of its associations and senses of belonging. So people are recalibrating who they are and where they belong. And this certainly happens, especially on the level of this sort of third generation down, all these cousins who are scattered around the globe and yet pulled into Berlin, where one of their cousins lives.
Great. We love the Mother's Ghost, and I love especially all the outfits that she comes on, when she appears. It's wonderful. But I was wondering about Ivanito's halo. Is the halo a shiny crown, or is it a crown of thorns? Is it just the pressure from his mother, or why did you choose that as a reflection of what's happening to him?
Yeah, maybe I'll backtrack a minute, but so the center, in a way, the cynosure of this galaxy of this book is a 30-year-old, one of the cousins. His name is Ivanito. He had been kidnapped as a boy by his aunt to the US, and then he had studied Russian in Cuba, not unusual at the time. Between one thing and another, he ends up Berlin as a translator by day, a drag queen by night. Anyway, the book opens in the prologue, and I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of it. I'm here in Barcelona in the middle of the night, and I don't have my book. Otherwise, I'd read you the prologue. But he's getting ready for a performance where he impersonates 1950s Cuban divas. And so he's impersonating Olga Guillot, getting ready, and so on. And suddenly his mother appears to him in this little whirl of color, and she's been dead for 20 years. And she begins to haunt him, and he wakes up after this encounter with the mother with what looks to him, but although no one else can see it, as this affliction of a halo that is burrowing deeper and deeper into his skull. So it's definitely related, at least to my mind, to the mother's presence. What does he owe her? What does she owe him? How is she still trying to control him, even, posthumously? So it remains a kind of mystery, and I think it's open to interpretation. I was doing a book club with actually my daughter's 4th grade teacher and her book club a couple of nights ago, and they asked the same thing about this halo. And I said, well, what do you think? And I got like 8 different answers, all of them lovely, all of them refractions of what it could possibly be. And of course, we all bring our own chains of associations to whatever we're reading.
Right, right. Speaking about your writing, a lot of people refer to your use of magic realism. And I just happened to listen to the Nancy Pearl interview that you did with her. Great librarian, Nancy Pearl.
I love her.
Anyway,
Yeah, she's great.
She refers to the term elastic realism. I hope you don't mind talking about that again. And how you gave a great definition that it gives you the ability to expand your characters. So can you just talk a little bit how do you include that? Do you write the character and then go back and add these? Or I'm curious the process. How does it develop?
Yeah, well, I don't remember exactly what I said to her, but just in terms of my own process, I am very interested in excavating, exploring the space between what is remotely possible and impossible. I find that terrain utterly fascinating and filled with all kinds of surprises. And so when I'm writing and I feel that something surreal or supernatural or extraordinary is beginning to happen, I try very hard not to stop it. I let it go. I mean, I might have to rein it in later, or I might have to finesse it in some way. But especially in the early drafts, I try not to get in the way of the unexpected. And I don't have to understand it all initially, or even at the end. I'm always learning things from readers, for example. But yes, but to kind of expand the universe of your characters by allowing and inviting mystery.
Right. No, it's great. I mean, it just flows very nicely. So I'm glad it comes to you that way. Another theme, you have many themes, there's a theme like of the Cuban Revolution and nostalgia of being dislocated and everything. But the mother-child bond is pretty dominant with all the cousins. And it seems like they all have had a very unhappy childhood or a traumatic childhood. So was that intentional, or was that something that they were all suffering from that,
Yeah, well, I think I don't know, I can speak for myself, but it might resonate with others. But I think immigration has its opportunities, but it also has its costs in terms of dislocation, in terms of isolation, in terms of Xochitl was talking about, traditions and history of being cut off from that and the support that offers. And so, many immigrants, I talk about my mother too, find themselves isolated, frustrated, maybe not being able to speak the language very well. And so the family becomes a kind of pressure cooker and outlet for that frustration. I mean, for many other things as well, but also this sense perhaps of arriving in a new country, in a new land, and being disparaged or unwelcomed, or and so that takes a toll, I think, and that takes a toll on the immigrant and also in the children who live and grow in the wake of that dislocation. And so I think that's what I think that's what these characters were experiencing to some extent.
Very good. You said that Dreaming Cuban was very autobiographical. Are any traces of you in Vanishing Maps?
Well, I've always thought of the Pilar Puente character as a bit of an alter ego. In Dreaming in Cuban, she was a teenage, punk revolutionary, she and always at loggerheads with her mother. And so I think of her as an alter ego because I wasn't like that. I wouldn't have survived, with my mother being like that, but I got to do it afterwards, ex post facto. And then Pilar, we see her fast forwarding. She's a single mother of a 6-year-old, and she's in Berlin in a sense in her 40s with this little boy trying to figure out who she is. So yes, I think she is the closest to my heart in terms of sensibility. If not the details of her life, but just in terms of her interiority and the way she mulls things over and what matters to her. Yeah, I think she is probably the closest to me.
I love Athul. I think he's a great character. He's only 6 years old, but he's got a presence in this book, and he also gets the apparitions and everything, just like his uncle. So maybe there's hope that we'll learn more about Athul in the future, or what do you think about that?
It's
Will
so
he be the
tempting, isn't
character?
it? Yeah, I know. I don't know. I'm trying to retire. I don't know. I can't seem to stop writing. We'll see. I don't know. It might be the end. It felt like a good bookend, to start in 92 with Dreaming and have all the books in between, and then end with Vanishing Maps. It feels like a bookend, so maybe I should quit while I'm ahead. I don't know, but I certainly love being part of community too, and I love teaching, and so in one way or another, I think I'll always be involved in the arts, literary arts, and otherwise.
Now you're going into the playwright. You're going to be doing that, right? Your next
Yeah, I've had a few plays produced. I just had I'm working on a trilogy of Chekhov adaptations into Latinx contexts. So I had a play called Palacios Sisters, which was based on Chekhov's Three Sisters. And it was set in 1980s Miami. It was such a hoot, and it played at the Gala Theater in Washington, D.C. And now I've finished part 2, which is based on the seagull. It's called Lost Birds, and I'm working on the third, which is called I don't know what it's called yet, but it could be either Royal Orchids or The Last Orchid Farm in Cuba, and based on the cherry orchard. Inspired. I'm a huge Chekhov fan, so I don't know. It's very fun. A different kind of challenge, obviously dialogue driven, and it takes a different kind of it takes a different kind of brain and momentum. Novels are, you hunker down for a few years. Plays happen fast because it's all just the dialogue has to do all the work.
Right. Very concise. You can't flower it up as much. But anyway,
and the taxi meter is on from the get-go,
So glad you did that in Vanishing Maps, though. Well, we'll end tonight like we did with Xochitl. And is there anything you want to tell us that you're reading, or any advice for writers coming along, or how would you like to?
Well, what am I doing? I'm mostly I'm looking into a lot. I'm in Barcelona now. This is my second month here. I'm almost finished, but I'm going to a lot of museums, and I'm reading a lot about artists. And right now I'm flipping through a book on this great Spanish photographer whom I've been following for a while, called so happens her name is Cristina Garcia, but Rodero is her last name. And she's brilliant. In fact, I wish I had it at hand. I would show you some of the images. They're absolutely haunting and gorgeous. And so I think right now I'm, while I'm working on the the Chekhov Orchid adaptation, which takes place in 1958, I'm mostly looking at visual art, although I've also reading a collection of Spanish short stories, and I'm also reading a book called Maniac about mathematicians by La Boutade, a Chilean writer. I'm all over the map. I'm terrible at giving lists because they're utterly incoherent.
Right. Well, we're so happy you were with us tonight, Cristina, and good luck with all your new projects. And we enjoyed your company tonight immensely. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Xochitl, for sharing the night, and
Get
much
some rest.
obliged. Yeah. Okay. Okay,
Thank you
great.
again. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Wow. Thank you to our authors and their publishers. I mean, it's thought-provoking, challenging. I think I'll be up all night. Thank you.
Oh, no, Norma.
And Flatiron Books and Knopf for your generous donation of books to our early registrants. Thank you as well to our interviewers, Patricia M. Garcia and Tess Tobin. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us tonight, and to those that submitted questions. Maybe we didn't get to them, but we'll share them. And we'd like to thank all our volunteers, without whom this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias to all. Please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Noble, etc. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as with other readers. And there are ways to, if you need some help getting started on those interviews, on those reviews, we have on our website, latinolit.com, some examples that'll help you get started. Buy books to support our authors. And if your library doesn't have a book you want to read, ask them to order one. And please attend your virtual local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. And remember that our book club is open to men and women, Latinos and non-Latinos, all are welcome. Our June books, or 2024 books, are Becoming Monster, A Becoming by Miles Borrero, Aloha Compadre, Latinx in Hawaii by Rudy P. Guevara Jr. Again, thank you all for your continued support of our book club in Latino literature. And please join us in celebrating Las Comadres and Friends National Latino Book Club throughout the year by buying books and supporting Latino authors. Buenas noches to all. Have a great evening.
Bye. Thank you. Gracias, Norma. Okay, a todos.